Hey everybody, welcome to the next episode of the Axe Academy. We call them AxeCast. My name is Eric Samuel Timm, and I want you to care for the now so there'll be a next. There are all kinds of ways that we can talk about this, but if you don't care for the now, there will be no next. In so many areas of your life, you don't care for your car, there will be no next. You don't care for the purchase of the right coffee beans, ground or whole bean, otherwise you're not going to have coffee in the morning. So I want to talk about 6 keys that every Christian leader should care for in the now so there will be a next. This Christian leader's paradox, a Christian leader's time, relationships, margin, technology, and mental health. 6 areas that you can care for the now so there'll be a next. Grab your axe, let's sharpen it, and keep singing away. Thanks for joining me here on the AxeCast. My name is Eric Samuel Timm. Honored to be with you. Remember, the Axe Academy is all about you and you discovering your voice, sharpening your tools so you can build and blaze what God has called you to do. Make sure you check it out at AxeAcademy.com. Tell a friend about it. Point people in this direction. We want to invest in you. Let's talk a little bit about this idea of being a Christian leader. This thought process behind what it takes to care for the now so there will be a next. It's sort of like if you don't care for your health, there's not going to be health tomorrow. If you don't care for your vehicle will not be there tomorrow. If you don't stock up on coffee grounds or whole beans because you grind them with a burr grinder like myself, you won't have coffee to make tomorrow. It's this idea where you care for the now so there will always be a next. I want to dive into 6 areas specifically in the now for you as a leader to carry into the next. First, let's talk about the Christian leader paradox. This idea of being a Christian leader. I think there's paradox here. Jesus says, come and lead, or did he say, come and follow? I mean, even this idea of having an AxeCast about Christian leadership is a paradox. I mean, it should be really Christian followership. I mean, you can go to Christian leadership conferences and books, and you can read about materials, but really, is there a lot of Christian followership conferences or books? I mean, even the idea of a shepherd in Israel, where they lead their sheep, where Jesus is getting many of his teachings from, this picture sometimes has been flipped, twisted, and distorted in our culture. A lot of times we think of a shepherd leading sheep as the shepherd out there in the front of the sheep, and the sheep are all following behind the shepherd, the guy with the crooked stick. But really, what happens is the sheep are actually in front of the shepherd, and the shepherd leads from behind. So this paradox of Christian leader is even seen on how a shepherd would lead his sheep. Jesus in Matthew 23:11 and 12, he says, hey, come and follow me, not come and lead for me. And there's this paradox that exists from the beginning. So let's just simply say when we're talking about Christian leadership, we're really talking about following Christ in this servant leadership model, which really kind of comes to leading from behind. So caring for the now, so there is going to be a next, will require you to get yourself off the pedestal. Get in the back. Keep washing those feet. Keep being the best follower, not just the best leader, but get your place and your space to where your influence never outgrows your humility. That has been something I have said over and over to myself, that I don't want to be a Christian leader. I want to be the best Christ follower. Christian is not a verb, it's not an adjective, it's a noun. It's a person, place, or thing. And so this idea of Christian adjective leadership being described as something Christian, even in the word there's paradox. In the way that Jesus calls us, there's paradox. In the way that a shepherd leads its sheep is paradox. When it comes to being a Christian leader, make sure that we're talking about being a Christ follower. Care for the now, or there will be no next. Now, by the way, I talk about this at length in a leadership model webinar and AxeCast that you can review. talking about different types of leadership that exist today across the spectrum of ways that we can lead, and then the model that Christ modeled for us as a servant leader. So the paradox is rich. Care for the now, there'll be the next. Get low. Get in the back. Keep washing those feet. Be the person there that is filled with humility. And your influence as a Christian leader will continue to grow. Okay, the other area that I think we need to really care for in the now, or there will be no next, is our time. Now, there is two types of time. The Greeks had two words, chronos and kairos. There is the chronos, the seconds on a clock, and the kairos, the perfect or opportune. So let's talk a little bit about the chronos first, about how we invest our time. I think that is something that we need to really pay attention to as leaders. We need to invest our time wisely. If you care for the now, there will be a next. If you invest that time wisely now, there's going to be a return on that investment in the next. You can easily invest your time into things that just don't matter, or that deplete your value, or that erode you as a person. But you can also invest your time into things that build your calling, your mental ability, other people's lives, your influence, your knowledge, someone's hope, someone's change. You can invest your time into the things that matter. Now, the average person invests about 2 hours a day, and this is rapidly climbing, about 2 hours a day into things that don't matter. Surfing YouTube, checking on Instagram for someone's dessert that they had. And this investment at that rate, the rate of return in your life, when you turn 40, approximately 10% of your life, 4 years, will be invested into the things that just don't matter. You'll be face to screen rather than face to face with your kids. This is important. Because James 4:14 says your life, my life, our life is like a vapor. So invest your time wisely. I am convinced that time, your life's currency, is the currency which all others will bow. If you want to talk about investing your time, you have to be aware of where it is going. Just like you would be aware of where you're spending your money or investing your money, actual paper, numbers and zeros in a bank account, we need to be more aware of where investing and spending the life currency that we have been given. None of it's guaranteed, and you got to seek the highest return on that investment. Care for the now, or there will simply be no next. Invest your time wisely. Be aware of the things that are eroding your time as a leader. Great leaders invest their time with intentionality and wisdom. They don't just let it go through their fingers. They don't just let the day pass them by. They happen to the day. They coordinate those attacks to make sure that time that they have been given is invested in the best way possible. Care for the now, or there will be no next. Let's talk about that other time word. The Greeks had that second word, kairos. Now, kairos time, that is that time that's opportune. That's that providential. That's the right place, right time. That's the holy moly, I can't believe that happened to me. The moment where, eternity invades our humanity. It's that time where the conditions are just right for something to be accomplished, birthed, fulfilled. It's that right place, right time. Now, what I would say about that, caring for the now, or there will be no next, is you are in the right place at the right time now. You are in that kairos moment. So many times we wait for the thing to happen, the graduation, the ceremony, the diploma, the business, the phone call, the resume to look well enough to where we feel like we're ready enough. Let me remind you, Caleb and the spies in Numbers 13, they went and checked out the land. This land had giants. Yes, this land was there. Obviously, Caleb said, no, let's go get it. And everyone else said, no, let's not. We're not ready. But sometimes it's our readiness in our own mind that proves to us our unreadiness altogether. Like we rely on ourselves more than God working through us. So let me just simply zero this conversation in on something very specific. When it comes to the right place at the right time, that I think you are all in, Kairos, at whatever level. And there are different Kairos moments, these opportune places. My point is in leadership, don't wait for something down the road that you think needs to be in place for you to finally be ready, for you to do what you need to do, for you to move forward in the dreams and the visions and the things that God has been instilling in you. Now, obviously, there are limitations to this logic. I mean, if you want to be a heart surgeon and you only have a degree in basket weaving, you're going to need to obviously go to medical school. But there are these ideas specifically in Christian leadership that somehow we're waiting for ministry to happen, or we're waiting for the right people to know. That's really where I want to focus. It's not all who you know. We've heard that said, like in leadership circles, specifically in Christian leadership circles, or any leadership circle, you could just simply say, it's all who you know. It depends on, if you're going to get that job, it's going to be who you know. It's all who you know. I reject that with every fiber in my being. It's not who you know. It's who knows you. I mean, the truth be told, I know who Dr. Dre is, but he doesn't know me. I mean, I know who Kanye West is, but I would be willing to bet Kanye West does not know me. So when it comes to your influence in your Kairos moments as a Christian leader, deepen who knows you. The relationships in your life, many times, are there to bring you to the place where God has for you to go next. God has already aligned it. You just have to deepen it. So too often we get caught in this place of, man, if I can only get on their radar. And then we forget about the people that God has already placed within our vicinity. I see this a lot. Now, I'm not going to tell you that I have been innocent of this, because there was a time where I would want to be on someone's radar. I mean, I remember learning this the hard way. I was on tour on this event called Outcry, and it was an amazing opportunity filled with amazing people. And through the course of the tour, I had a couple books at my merch table, and I wanted to give away a couple of these books to a couple of the members of Jesus Culture. And rather than asking or talking through that, I literally had these books in my suitcase in the locker room where we would shower after bus call. I remember a very, very awkward, altercation with me and a friend now, Mr. Jeffrey Cundy, where hey, Jeff, I know you're half naked and so am I, but I wrote this book and I think you'd like it. It's almost like I tried to get on someone's radar. I see this all the time in the green rooms or out in a lobby on a tour that I'm on. People are just trying to get their demo tape over there to whoever it is. And it's almost like, listen, if you're trying to open up doors that are 4 or 5 doors ahead of the one door that's in front of you, you're going to go through that door in your own strength. You're going to maybe see that Kairos moment open in your own power, and you're not going to be ready for it. And it's going to literally cripple you. So what I'm saying is just simply this. As a Christian leader, be aware that you are in the right place at the right time, and it involves people that God has already brought into your life. That's not to say that he won't bring new ones in, but don't try and skip 4 or 5 doors down the journey of the doors that he opens. Deepen the relationships that are around you, because it's not all who you know, it's who knows you. And in that place, I think you'll find those Kairos moments all too often. Care for the now, so there'll be a next. All right, let's talk a little bit about living with room for cream. Do you remember the last time you went and got coffee and they said to you, hey, do you want cream? You want room for cream? You're at Starbucks. I mean, have you ever gone to Starbucks? What am I saying? Have you ever gone to Starbucks? I'm sorry. I apologize. Have you ever gone to, 5 Watt in Minneapolis? Have you ever gone to another amazing coffee shop in Nashville? I mean, there's a billion of them. But the point is if you've ever gone to a coffee shop and got an Americano, they ask you, would you like room for cream? Or a regular coffee, would you like room for cream? And some of the drinks that you order, they're just basically mostly cream anyway. But they ask you that question because they want to know, would you like some room for cream? I think that is a metaphor for us. As leaders, we need to live with room for cream. What I mean is you're living for something that brings you joy. Like you have space and margin that isn't about what you do. It's about connecting you to who you are. It's just not work. It's something you do for free, and you're not paid to do it. You see, when you get paid to do something, your gift that you monetize becomes a talent. And that matters, what you do with those talents. It truly does. Jesus talks about this. But that talent that you're getting a paycheck to do, that thing that you're gifted at, that becomes a way of monetizing your time. It becomes a talent. It becomes work. And that work is the very thing that God cursed in the fall. Work is a curse. The dominion mandate was simply flipped. Now you are going to have this sweat of your brow, your toil. You will toil the land. It wasn't now you're just going to get to eat from this. No, now you're going to have to work to do it. And in that same way, you get paid, you are working. You give your time, you are just simply sowing. You get paid, it's a talent. You give your time, it's a gift. And so too often we monetize gifts that we have into talents, and we never step away from them. We never Sabbath well. We don't plan it that way. We end up living to work, not working to live. So when it comes to living room for cream, work harder for the rest as you do for the work. Hustle for the rest. Grind for the Sabbath. I have one idea for you when it comes to your calendar. Ask yourself this question. When is your next day off? When are you going on vacation with your spouse? When is your next family vacation? If you can't answer those questions like, hey, what do you do for fun? Well, then I think sometimes you are just operating underneath the curse continually. There is so much to this that I want to talk about more on another AxeCast, specifically about a field and Sabbath when it comes to what we do and how we forego it and the implications of it for our life. But simply stated in Exodus 23:11, we have to find this place where we care for the now so there'll be a next. We care for the margin. We leave room for cream. We have a gift that we operate in that is for us to remind us who we are. That's something that we do not monetize, that we don't put on a website, that we don't make a subscription, that we don't turn into a ministry that somehow we get paid to do. It's a gift that reminds us who we are. And in that space, we care for the next. So now is the time to live with room for cream. Now let's talk a little bit about a Christian leader's technology. We talked about a Christian leader's paradox, a Christian leader's time, a Christian leader's, kairos time as in relationships, a Christian leader's Sabbath or margin. Let's talk a little bit about our technology. What does it take to be a leader when it comes to technology? Well, first of all, smartphones, which are arguably not making us any smarter, they're everywhere and they're all-knowing. Albert Einstein talked about this. Information is not knowledge. And we have access to more information than we ever have before. I mean, you can literally halfway through anything, Google anything that you want to know, and it will give you the information. It doesn't mean you're going to retain it or know it. There is a huge difference between the two. But the truth is that smartphone, those computers, the internet, the thing that we carry in our pocket allows us to be everywhere and all-knowing. It reminds me a lot like the Tower of Babel, where they were wanting to be omniscient and omnipresent. They wanted to be like God, everywhere, all-knowing. So they built this huge tower. They built this thing to be like God, just like we've built these chips, these infrastructures, this data web of information, and it allows us to be everywhere and all-knowing. Now, God didn't want that to happen. He didn't let that happen because he knows our human frame cannot handle omniscience and omnipresence. We are not able to house everywhere all the time. It simply shows up in your life when you get your phone out and you are on social media and all of a sudden you're geographically in one area, but geographically in 1,000 other areas. And there is this sense of anxiety that comes up that's like what we have referred to as FOMO, where now we're all over the place. Now, God's job is to be everywhere and all-knowing. God's job is omniscience and omnipresence. Ours is not. We are built for intimacy and location, table, proximity. We are meant to experience life with other human beings, not human doings, not full of information, but revelation that comes from people. And that will come from proximity. So when it comes to caring for the now, or caring so there will be a next, now is the time for proximity. Face-to-face relationships with your family, with your friends. The next time you're out to eat with your spouse, shut your phone off. Next time you're with a group of other leaders, shut your phone off. The next time you're with your kids, leave your phone at home. Your frame cannot handle omnipresence and omniscience. You must step out from it. Now, one of the things I like to do, ironically, that I talked about on my Instagram, is I take my SIM card out of my iPhone and I put it in one of those Nokia 35 whatever candy bar phones. You remember that phone? You could use it for like 9 weeks and you'd charge it like once. You could literally drop it and the battery would go one way, your phone would go the other, the cover would go another, and you could find all of those items, click them back together, and you'd be playing Snake or Solitaire in no time. Those were amazing phones. And the reason why they were amazing is it allowed us to be connected, but yet not fully distracted. It was something where it enhanced our human ability, just like technology does, but it didn't allow us to be everywhere all the time. It still allowed us to be contacted, but there was something about it where we had not opened Pandora's box yet. So buy one of those. They're $20 on eBay. And when you really want to fall off the grid, there are even phone companies that are on Kickstarter all the time that are like literally dealing out these phones that just call because we need to care for the now or there'll be no next. Care for the technology that you do not become a slave to it, but you are a master of it. And in that way, it's something that you can use, not something that will use you. Care for the now, or there'll be no next. Now let's talk just briefly about a Christian leader's mental health. Now something I want to talk just, I guess, from an advertisement perspective is I did a huge podcast, AxeCast is what we call them, about mental health just recently when a friend of mine took his own life. Really hard chapter for his family, for him, I'm sure, and everybody else around us. It's been absolutely brutal. Anyone who's been in the vicinity of a suicide, it's one of those moments where we have a whole nother set of questions. So I talk about this at length in the extended AxeCast on theaxeacademy.com. If you aren't a student, supporter, patron, subscriber, whatever we want to call it, of the Axe Academy, then you will not be able to have access to that. If you are, then you can go there and listen to that entire conversation about worry, fear, depression, anxiety, some really practical, topical things on how we can help ourselves and how we can help others navigate this thing called mental health. But from a Christian leadership perspective, I just want to offer a couple thoughts before I let you go. Number one, our theology has changed. It used to be, well, at least when I grew up, that suicide wasn't an option, and if you did it, you'd go to hell. And then it's changed into suicide is not an option, but it's not that you'd go to hell. And now it's changed to suicide is an option, and it's a one-way ticket to heaven. So like this hell, not option, option, how do we get back to where theologically, where I would stand, and I talk about this again in an Acts question and in an Acts course about suicide in the Bible, where it's not necessarily a one-way ticket to heaven or hell, and it certainly isn't an option. How do we get back there? Well, first of all, we need to change the way we talk about this as Christian leaders. We need to be aware that in Scripture, it reveals to us that we are soul, spirit, and body. And there are three parts of that anthropological nature of humankind. There's our mind, will, and emotions. There's the spirit that's alive, once dead in Christ. And there's the tent, the earthly body, the thing that you take Advil for. So when we're talking about this, it's not just a spiritual issue. It's not just a soul issue. And a lot of times what's happening in our soul, the mind, will, and emotions, is not necessarily being subject to the right spirit, and it shows up in the body. It's all three. We need to talk about this in all three areas. How we think, what we know, and how we truly feel. It's not just a pill or a prayer. It might be both. And therapy for the mind or counseling from an earthly counselor is not demonic. It's out of order. If anything, I would argue that having the heavenly counselor, the Prince of Peace, the Holy Spirit, and an earthly counselor, a conduit of that Spirit, is maybe the best option. Change the way we talk about this. The second thing. And by the way, anybody that is out there that has thought about this as a leader, something that I've struggled with in my own life, that I've been open about, I will say this. We may not go to hell, but we will, or someone will. If you take your own life, bring hell to earth. That is the truth. I may not go to hell if I take my own life, but I will bring hell to earth. Hell in my community, hell in my kids' lives, hell in my story, hell in legacy. And that's not always easy to say, but it's something that I've had to remind myself in. You may get to heaven, but your job is not just to get to heaven. My job is to bring heaven to earth. Second thing, it's not what's wrong with you. It's truly what's right with you if you're asking for help. As a Christian leader, if you're asking to see a counselor, that's what's right with you, not what's wrong with you. Now, Solomon, the wisest man, arguably to live, as Scripture records, Proverbs 11:14, the way of the fool is right in his own eyes, but a wise man listens to counsel. Proverbs 13:10, well, where there is no guidance, the people fail, but in the abundance of counselors, there's victory. Proverbs 19:20, in isolation, nothing comes but strife, but wisdom is found those who receive counsel. Proverbs 24:6, by guidance you'll wage war and accept discipline, that you'll be wise the rest of your days. I mean, that's just a few. There are hundreds of Proverbs as well as other Scripture that points to the fact that we don't do this in isolation. When you see a counselor, it's not what's wrong with you. It is what is right with you. One quick note about that. When you are a Christian leader and you need to see a counselor, find someone that you can show your entire hand to, that you can display all of the chinks in your armor, and make sure that they are not attached to your paycheck as a paid clergyman or woman of the gospel. Find someone that you can be completely transparent with that is not connected to your organization, your denomination, or your paycheck. Because we talk about it being a safe place. But in self-preservation, if we know our career or the talents that we have monetized from the gift that God has given us as a paid clergyman, if we know that will jeopardize that, the mortgage payment, the real life security of our family, the whatever it is, we will not hold or show all those cards. We will hold some of them. You're not going to tell everybody everything because it's self-preservation. That kicks in. We just naturally want to live and thrive, and so we're not going to tell everybody everything because they're connected to the bread. They are connected to the hand that feeds, and we don't want to bite that hand. 9 Inch Nails did a song about that. I mean, that couldn't be any closer to the truth. You don't want to bite the hand that feeds you. And I'm not telling you to listen to that song, but that's the truth. We know it is true. In this way, find someone who you can truly show that chink in the armor that is not above you or in your pay scale, because self-preservation will kick in. The other thing I just simply say is, really for us, when it comes to Christian leadership and our mental health, living for Jesus is one thing, but I think some people just live for the ministry. So now is the time to care for this now, so there'll be a next, to really realize that Jesus cares more about you than your ministry, your organized structure, your place of employment, your church, aka your job. He cares more about you. And I will give you permission to do something else and let God direct you. I had a friend who I called out of the blue while I was driving west of Minneapolis on my way to South Dakota. I just called to tell him because he wasn't in ministry anymore. He'd quit his church and moved back. He had his kids and they moved around looking for this pastoral job, and now he was selling cars and he was working at Costco and all the rest of it. Not to give you too much information, but the point is I just called to tell him to say, it's okay. It's okay to do something else. It's okay to know that Jesus cares more about you, and you don't have to live for the ministry. You have to live for him. And in that, you become a minister. And by the silence and the tears on the other line of that phone, he needed to know. He just needed to know. And I think somebody maybe out there just needs to know. When it comes to a Christian leader's mental health, Jesus cares more about you than the job that you do. Care for the now, or there will be no next. 6 areas that I think all of us can focus in on in the now, so there is a next. The Christian leader paradox, a Christian leader's time, a Christian leader's relationships, a Christian leader's margin, a Christian leader's technology, and a Christian leader's mental health.